Ever stop to think that your eyes might be more than just, windows to the soul? Today, we're diving into a really radical idea. What if the physical shape of your eyes is actually a direct blueprint for how your mind is wired?
So let's just start with this big question right here. What if the physical traits of your eyes, their shape, their depth, what if none of that was random? What if it was all a hint, a blueprint for your mind's internal operating system? That's the fascinating premise we're going to unpack.
Okay, so at the very heart of this model, you have two fundamental archetypes, two totally distinct ways of seeing and thinking. We're going to call them the architect and the sentinel. And they represent two opposing, yet, and this is the key part, deeply complementary ways of processing the world around us. So on one side, you got the strategic architect. This is the meticulous planner, the one who builds the systems. And on the other side, you have the tactical sentinel, the quick-reacting survivor, constantly scanning the environment. Think of them as the two core engines of perception. Understanding how they're different, well, that's key to this whole thing.
So the architect, what's its primary job? It's all about finding and building logic. This archetype is obsessed with understanding the why behind everything. It's constantly organizing information, building these stable, symmetrical systems, almost like it's trying to see the underlying code that governs the universe. The sentinel, on the other hand, is a completely different story. It's designed for one thing, to survive the world's chaos. Its whole function is to react to the immediate moment, the now. It's not looking for deep universal laws. No, it's looking for the immediate threat, or that fleeting opportunity. It's a master of survival. All right, so let's get out of the abstract and into the real, tangible stuff. We're going to take a look at this from a performance engineering perspective. Think of the eyes and the brain as specialized hardware, where each piece is optimized for a very, very different job. So check out the breakdown of the physical hardware specs here. For the architect, you see this symmetrical almond shape. It has a 3-to-1 ratio designed for really high precision focus. Their pupils are naturally more constricted, kind of like a camera lens, stopped down for sharpness. The sentinel, totally different. The eyes are rounder, more like a wide-angle lens designed to pull in as much light as possible for constant vigilance. It's all about awareness, not deep analysis. And get this, here's a pretty stunning data point from this model. The architect's eye structure supposedly matches the golden ratio with 94% accuracy. That's a huge signature of mathematical order. And the sentinel, only 72%. Their design prioritizes raw biological function over that kind of perfect, elegant form. And this physical difference goes right down to the neural wiring. The architect's brain apparently shows dense white matter. You can think of that like having a fiber optic cable for incredibly fast, efficient signals. It's a true core processor. The sentinel, however, relies on high synaptogenesis, which just means tons and tons of connections. It's acting more like an edge processor that can handle a flood of real-time data. One is built for deep thought, the other for immediate reaction. So we've looked at the hardware. Now, what about the software it's running? How does this deep-seated wiring actually change the way these two archetypes think, learn, and go about solving problems? Well, their pathways for growth are completely different. The architect grows vertically. They go incredibly deep into one subject to achieve total mastery. They're the ones who read the manual cover to cover to understand the system. The sentinel grows horizontally. They want wide exposure to a lot of different things to build adaptability. They don't read the manual. They scan for bugs and solutions to master the moment. Here's a really cool way to think about it, using a computer science metaphor. The architect's mind is like searching for a name in a phone book. Because it's all organized alphabetically, they can find it incredibly fast, even if the book is massive. The sentinel's mind, though, is like a fire alarm. It doesn't search. It just reacts instantly. It's a pure reflex. And that's the crucial difference here. One thinks, the other reacts. Okay, now this is where things get really dramatic. How do these two completely different operating systems hold up under extreme pressure? Like, say, in a war scenario. And maybe even more important, how do they end up depending on each other? Just take a look at these numbers. The difference in endurance is just massive. The architect is a marathon runner, incredibly metabolically efficient, able to keep going for 72, even 120 hours. But the sentinel is a sprinter, burning incredible amounts of energy. They can only sustain that peak performance for about 12 to 18 hours before complete burnout. So every system has a weakness, right? For the architect, its kryptonite is chaos. It's what happens when information becomes illogical, unpredictable, when the world just stops fitting into their neat internal models. When that happens, the architect's entire logical engine just starts to crash.
So if you wanted to defeat an architect, you'd use what this model calls an entropy strike. First, you introduce illogical tactics that shatter their predictive models. Then, you cut off their data feed, basically paralyzing them. And finally, you overload them with a paradox, a problem they can't solve, and their whole system gets stuck in a logic loop. Now, the Sentinel's weakness is different. It's not a failure of logic, it's a hardware failure. Their weakness is simply exhaustion. It's a state of complete sensory and metabolic burnout from running at peak intensity for way too long. Their system doesn't get confused, it literally overheats and shuts down. So the counter strategy is a saturation strike. You just flood their input channels with overwhelming sensory data, strobe lights, high decibel noise. You use decoys to force them to burn precious energy chasing nothing. You can even exploit their wide-open, dilated eyes, which are super vulnerable to being bleached by intense flashes of light. You just cause a total system crash. But here it is. This might be the most crucial point of this entire explainer. These two archetypes, they aren't just adversaries. They're two sides of the exact same coin. A perfect system needs both. You need the architect to design the stable code, and you absolutely need the sentinel to find and correct the errors in real time. So let's bring this all together and look at the final pattern. What we've really been looking at is this fundamental duality, this necessary tension between the forces of long-term structure and immediate survival. So here it is, boiled down to its absolute essence. The architect is logic, structure, stability, and that constant search for why. The sentinel is survival, reaction, velocity, and the complete mastery of the now. One builds the map, the other navigates the terrain, and you absolutely cannot have a functioning system without both. And that really brings us to the final question, the one for you. After hearing all of this, which archetype feels more like you? Are you the architect or are you the sentinel? Which one of these engines is powering your mind?